Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Glad to see the family back together again today. Yesterday was a great day. We're looking forward to another great day. So, Devin, if you would pin me and, pin Suzanne and Susan, hello. If you would pin Susan and me, we'll get started with our interview of Susan RoAne. There she is. Hi, Susan. How are you today?
Hello.
So, Susan was supposed to be with us in person in La Jolla, and she will be next year. And she is going to be one of our recipients of the Legends Award next year. But we wanted a preview of a coming attraction today. So you're so good to join us. How are you today? And then tell us what you're working on now.
I was just going to say, total puns. When you said coming attraction, I was going to say thank you, because no one wakes up and says, oh, you look attractive. So I just decided to reinterpret what you said. What am I working on now? I think given the pandemic, to be honest, I did not learn to make sourdough. I live in San Francisco area. I did not learn a new language. I did not write a book. What I did is I spent 2 years staying in touch with people, creating groups, doing what I do, and making sure that I adjusted and did not go into the fits of woe that other people did. So what am I working on now? I am actually working on making sure I never use the word retired. My line for that has been, and now for sure is, I'm not shy and I'm not retiring. So I think that's, that really sums it up. But I realized, I was thinking I wasn't writing, and I know I came yesterday and we had a little group that I sat in on. But you know what? I am writing. Social media is writing. If I look back of what I have written and what I have stood up for and what I've said, whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn and Facebook, very thoughtful posts. And I go, we are writing. What we do is, if we don't have a book that we finish, we think we're not writing. But no, I'm going to give everyone a hint. And I learned this for myself. I once had a deadline and I wasn't writing. And the woman I called Mumsy said to me, of course you're writing. You are pre-writing. You are gathering your thoughts. You're keeping your eyes open and your ears open. So what I'm working on is staying in touch with people, staying in touch with the world. And I would tell you this, and this is all my theme for every year. I don't pick a yearly theme. Staying relevant. And I think we as writers have to do that, because we really need to have a handle on what's going on beyond our own area of expertise. So that's a long-winded answer for, I've been watching a lot of Netflix.
Yeah. So there's at least a million reasons we are honoring you. And that goes back to your, I think it was your first book. Was it your first book?
How to Work a Room.
All your books are your children, and I know you don't play favorites with your children, but there's one child that's done exceedingly well. If you would tell everybody about that, please.
Well, How to Work a Room was my first book, and it came about in the way so many things happen, is that I wrote an article on it for a couple of different magazines and etc. And then I was writing and coordinating the San Francisco Examiner Career Series for 3 years. And I took a writing class from Judith Briles, who many of you may have heard of. She had been a best-selling author, and she was doing a class for National Speakers Association San Francisco. And when I got to the class, she held up one of my columns and said, Suze, only 2 people call me that, you can really write. How to Work a Room should be a book. It never occurred to me until she said that. So that's where you all are so far ahead of the game. You know that what you have to say should be a book. You don't need someone else to tell you. But that book is, it's still around. It's still in bookstores. It's still available. It was published in November of 1988. I think it's going to outlive me, Henry.
Well, I think it does. That's one of the secrets of a great book, is that it inspires people we'll never know, we'll never meet. Maybe we never have a chance of meeting. So now, how do we work a virtual room?
Well, here's what people think. They think it's very, very different. And in a lot of ways it is. But the basics are the same. The basics are, if you're invited to go somewhere, you look at the invitation, you RSVP, and here's the magic. You show up just as everyone has done today. So the people that are saying, I'm so isolated, there's nothing to do, all you have to have is a computer, an iPad, a phone, and you can show up in places. So I think that that's the first thing. The other thing is you have to know where you're going. And if you're coming to this, that's one thing. If you're going to a fundraiser online for a local charity, it's something else. If you're invited to a lecture, I just signed up for a lecture, an interview from Dr. Richard Haas, who's one of our I don't know if he was an ambassador, but he is foreign affairs, the head of the Foreign Affairs Council. Show up. You don't know who you're going to meet. I don't know if any of you have been listening to the news and seeing Ambassador Michael McFaul, who was our ambassador to Moscow. He was in a Zoom fundraiser for Cory Booker, where every single sport, oh, you would have loved this, Henry. The head of the MLB was there. The head of the NBA was there because of Cory Booker and his sports thing. And Michael McFaul was there. And I sent him, and this is what I want us to remember. I sent him what we would call the sidebar conversation in the chat and said, oh, I know my way to Stanford, where he's now a professor, been there for 7 years of football games, enticed him. We've been in touch. So really, I think if we know how to use Zoom or whatever platform in the sidebars, we can have independent conversations and start building relationships, or at least introduce ourselves. One of my interesting, I think it's a pet peeve, someone gets into a Zoom room and immediately they put in their LinkedIn information. Well, that's great if everyone's on LinkedIn, but that might not be the way everybody communicates. So I think you also put in your email. That would be my thing. We still have to have our manners, how we act in a Zoom room. People can see, and maybe, I don't know, dress for the occasion. Now, this is personal. The idea of having, appropriate styling. After this, I am going in San Diego online to a bar mitzvah. I am dressed up as if I were going to the bar mitzvah. But the idea is, if you are going somewhere, this is not schlub time because we're on Zoom. I think we need to look professional. We need to look like we're respectful of the event, and that someone like me takes screenshots. You don't want to be caught in a screenshot not looking professional. So I think that that's part of it. The other part of how to work a Zoom is, if someone says something you like, let them know. Exchange information. Oh, that's really interesting. That was fun, etc. But if you don't let people know, how are you going to start the conversation? So I think it's important to pay attention and say something nice when you think something nice.
The chat feature of Zoom has been very interesting to me. I'm going to ask you to talk more about that, but because in the past, we, respect for the speaker, no side conversations. I hear you're embracing the side conversation. Tell me more.
Okay, well, it's not instead of listening to the speaker, but I have known that people have done this when somebody makes a statement that they think is a wow, they will quote it and put it in the chat so that everyone is reminded. So it's a way of reinforcing what the speaker said. But it's also, the thing about a chat is you could send a private a private chat. And I've done some research, and people who know, and more than I, which is everybody on Zoom, say that when you send something specifically to a person, it is not captured. But a couple of people said, yeah, you think? So I don't say anything. Maybe I'll say this. Don't say anything even in the private chat that you would possibly have to defend, either in a court of law or in front of the person. But private chats, I've done this where I've seen somebody and I go, oh, it's so good to see you. Not to everyone. Also, that's the other trip up, Henry. Sometimes people write something to everyone. It's like that all reply all. No, say it to the specific person if you have something to say. But that's how you start the relationship, is you send the message. But then there's another part to it. Some people don't check the chat. And the chat will come up red when it's for you or for everyone. Every so often you have to look at the chat to see if there's something you should know. And some people don't do that.
I'm in favor of the chat interactions because I believe it produces more interaction for the overall event. Our producers will highlight things or compliment people where it's due. I can't do that and interview you and stay engaged. So other people, and then other people told me, like, oh, did you see those comments during your speech? I go, no, I'm not reading the chat while I'm talking because I need to be engaged at all times. So
it's true.
It's an evolving world. I think it's good. I remember a Harvard professor I was talking to a few years back, and one of her students approached and said, Professor, there's this new program where, since we're all on our laptops, during your lecture, we can be connected with each other and be passing information back and forth and engaged. And she was horrified. It was like, and now we're at Zoom, and now it's happened.
But as a former teacher, I'm sure her thought was, oh my God, they're going to be passing notes electronically. That's the same thing with Slack that everybody's on, et cetera. And I love the name of it because it seems like it's for slackers, but I'm not sure. Or that's how someone named it. A lot of things that we were horrified about have turned out to have a side benefit. I have a neighbor. He was able to take a month-long trip to India to show his in-laws their new granddaughter. But he said he never could have done it had it not been for the pandemic. I said, what do you mean? And he said, everyone had to be in the office every day. But because of the pandemic and the fact that everyone was able to work from home, it taught the owners of the company that he can do his work even if home is in Mumbai. So we have had some benefits from all this. And I'm going to just go off topic a minute. The benefit of being isolated and not being able to go out, I just want to show off, is white hair. Because I didn't have my hair colored for a long time, and now I have a new hairdo. I think it's every cloud has a lining. Some of it is silver and some of it's white.
Go. Now that's comedy. Hey, you also did go out. You found a great bakery. Wasn't it for, not just for challah, but for...
Oh, it was the babka.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Henry and I had this discussion. Now, here's what happens when you have a relationship with people And this is, every author must have a relationship with, whether you're traditional and you have it with an editor and an agent and a publisher, or whether it's with the people doing your design work or editing, or Henry and Mark, you have to have relationships. Well, Henry wanted to know where to get good babka. Now, I have to tell you, he went to me, source. I never heard of babka because we didn't have it in Chicago until a friend of mine who's Catholic told me about the Seinfeld episode. And I saved Henry's day because it wasn't a San Francisco bakery. And this is my little tip. Trader Joe's has the best chocolate babka ever. But that's, remember, Henry, I took a picture of it.
Yeah, and I kept going to my Trader Joe manager till they got it in San Diego.
I see, you all talk about making millionaires, and what did I do? I made a babka appear in San Diego.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far afield, but before Trader Joe's could get it in, I went to Cantor's, which is a Jewish deli in LA. It's not authentic New York because the waiter came up and said, can I get your order? We said, we're still deciding. Take all the time you want.
Oh, no.
5 minutes. And I go, oh, okay. But the pastrami was good. But afterwards, I go to the counter, and this one, no matter how old you are, the women at the counter are older than you. So these were old women. But this one, I pointed, oh yeah, the babka. They said, and I said, well, let me wait to order to see what my wife, what she wants. So Vicky came, and this other woman came up to help me. I said, I'd like a slice of the babka, please. We don't have babka. I said, you have this right here. That's not babka. I said, well, okay, whatever it is, why don't you give me a slice of it? Well, it's not babka. And she goes off. And the nice guy next to me says, son, he goes, don't argue with the deli counter women. You're lucky you didn't get run out of here.
Now, that to me is a keeper. Don't argue with the deli people. Yeah. But yes, I knew that your Cantor waiter was young and not authentic because he did say, take your time. There were just some old myths that happened to be true. But I want to point out to some of you might say, well, you guys are off topic. You're talking about bakery goods. We're not. We have a relationship. This was part of it. We have a story. Sometimes what you think might be off your topic is the topic of interest to the other person. And if you want to develop relationships, people have said to me, well, I don't know what to talk about. Well, I wrote also, what do I say next? I go, I got an idea. Listen to what people are talking about. They tell you what they're interested in. And instead of your agenda for conversation and working a room or Zoom, because I always think your agenda is printed on your forehead. If you're open and you're open to conversation, that's how you will find out what people are interested in and build the beginning of the exchanges that build the basis for relationships.
During the pandemic, when I like to say I tested positive for cabin fever, during that lockdown, we would have calls at 5 o'clock on Friday. And in filmmaking, the last shot of the day is called the martini. And you called our calls the quarantini. We were done with work for the week. We would just have conversations like this. Well, and to the point that you made, it's so much about relationships. I was so honored. Mark and I were speaking in San Francisco. This will get a little personal. We were speaking in San Francisco and 6 people showed up. Well, our motto is wherever 2 or more are gathered, we're great. We'll talk. So really but one of the 6 was you. You showed up, and I said, and I knew you by reputation and I heard you speak. I said, what are you doing here? You don't. And you said, Patricia Fripp told me to come. Fripp loves you. I'm here. And then we talked, and you found out that the next day I was going to be giving the eulogy at my mother's funeral. And you started to say, what are you doing here? And then you said, oh, she would want you here. I went, yeah, and then you had, do you mind sharing? Because you've had a similar experience.
Well, I had something happen years ago. By the way, I think I brought a little dessert with me for that group. And I just saw someone at Flash said, food is magic. By the way, if you have no topic that you want to talk about, mention food. But let me give you a hint. And this is a how to work a room hint when we're back in rooms. If you go to an event and it's a stand up and circulate, always go to the dessert table first, because that's where you're going to find the most friendly people, and they're happy to talk about their calorie intake, how delicious, whatever. And as I have said many times, I've never found an interesting person or conversation at the cut up vegetable table. So that's just my own opinion. Vegetarians, please don't get angry at me. I think they call them crudités now, and I would have said it kind of differently. I had something happen. I was speaking, and it was a speech that was negotiated by Washington Speakers Bureau, and it was in Florida. I think I told you this, Henry. And I had found out the day before that my father had passed away, and I had to figure out how to get with Florida clothes to Chicago in January. And I told no one that my father had passed away. And the reason was, and this is for those of you that are going to speak about topics, et cetera, is I know that what people will do when they find that out is they might say, well, she wasn't up to her 100% because she knew this information. So I told no one, so no one would know. But I knew this. My father owned his own company. My father had been a salesman for 26 years, and he really believed in serving the customer. And I had to take that with me and continue to do a talk on how to work a room, and knowing like the next room I would be in would be at the memorial and then sitting Shiva. So but you have to, I think, honor that part of the loved one that is gone, who encouraged you to do this. And maybe this is the other thing from, you talked about the martini hour. The show must go on. And, I will share this personally. My brother had polio back in the days before the vaccine. And because of relationships my father went to work every day before he went to the hospital. But because of the relationships he built with customers and with, associates, people were so generous in what they did and how they helped and what could we do. So I come from a real backlog of a real interesting time where people came to support. And so I carry that with me. And maybe I try to share that in how to work a room. And can I tell you how I started? Someone once asked me, well, how did you learn how to work a room, Susan? You could see that. Can you hear the person's tone coming out of me?
Yeah.
And I remember it was in a Q&A, and the person's tone was, shall we say, off-putting. I knew I couldn't go Chicago on her at the moment. So what I did is I thought, okay, how would you handle this? And what I said to her, what learned? My mother made me. And then she looked at me quizzically, and there's a whole room of people. I said, well, if we had a family event in celebration, my mother would say, go talk to my cousins from Toronto and make sure they don't talk to your Aunt Anne, who was my father's sister. I thought that's a big job for an 11-year-old. But sometimes if we handle something with some level of humor, we can cut through some of that, I don't know, I'd say that nastiness. I think humor is a good it's a good leveler if it's done right. And by the way, I did write about humor in How to Work a Room, but I studied it. I went to the humor library in San Francisco and read the research. By the way, if any of you can't sleep, feel free to go to the most boring research I ever read was on humor. And oh my God, constructs and whatever. But what I learned a lot about humor, and I learned that humor is never at the expense of other people, especially if they're standing next to you in the room.
So humor is a serious subject, and it has gotten me so far in life, but it's also bitten me in the rear end many times. So there's certain things, like you're saying, don't punch down. You know, if the joke has to be on somebody, try to make it on you. These are certain things that we need to do. I also learned that not everyone laughs at sarcasm, not because they don't understand it, but because they're offended and think you're awful for using sarcasm. And you know, my family was no cover charge, 2 drink minimum. There was a lot of humor going on. My children called our house comedy camp, and they gave me a head counselor t-shirt, because at the dinner table, somebody would make a joke and there would be silence, and another family member would say, kale, use kale. Kale's a funnier word. They would say, yes, yes, funny joke, kale, the K sound. You know, that's where we grew up, and knowing that. I was also thinking about our parents, and we've talked about it, but a friend of mine had to cancel golf next week because he has to go to Mexico to represent California and all this. And my response was, first the work, then the play. See you next week. That's Janice DeVries going.
Yes.
And I just want to thank you so much for the things you've taught me through your speeches and writing through the years. But the real quick thing, you go into a room, you go to that dessert table, and you say to the person, so what do you do when you're not having dessert here at the St. Regis? and they'll either give you a funny answer or the real answer, and it's great. And then finding out, well, who are you looking to meet? And you can be such a hero by bringing somebody over and saying, you're looking for a manufacturer. And I just met Bob, and Bob's heads a manufacturing company. And, you know, why don't you tell them about the HR services you do? Oh, they want to kiss you on the lips, you know, because they don't like to be in the room. They don't like to talk to strangers either. So you can be a hero that way. I'll learn.
And let me jump in and just say something from How to Work a Room. And that is, talk to people standing alone. A lot of people think it's a strategy. I'm going to say it in another way. They might be shyer. They may not have heard Susan speak. But the most important thing is, it is a kind thing to do, to talk to the person who you know is a little uncomfortable standing alone. Dr. Adele Sheely, who was the founder of the first career center at Cal State Northridge, she wrote years ago in Success Magazine, and I quoted her then, and I continue to quote her, and this is an example for writers. You always quote your source, even if it's 40 years later. They are never no longer your source just because a lot of time has passed. So you always give credit where credit is due. She wrote then that what makes it successful is every time you go into any venue, act like the host. And it's what you said, Henry. What do hosts do? The best hosts introduce us to other people. And in Secrets of Savvy Networking, which Henry knows is my favorite books because it has my Chicago-based kind of mafia attitude. But in Secrets of Savvy Networking, I remember writing, I think I didn't say it quite like this in the book. Any idiot can make something happen for themselves, but the savvy networker makes things happen for other people.
Thank you so much for being here. we look forward to being with you again. And, I think it's time for another Forbes.com column. There's a lot of
yes,
wisdom
let's,
you have to share.
from babka to brilliance.
And back again.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
all.
you so much. Thank you. Let's give
See you
a
next year.